Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, episode 191. I'm Don Irvine, your host, and my co-host, as always, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right. Wow. So actually, today's an interesting day. I completely forgot until I was double checking some things. It's Groundhog Day, and I guess Punxsutawney Phil has already made the prediction of 6
More
weeks
winter.
more
Thanks,
winter.
Phil.
I don't know. I keep
Good job, buddy.
I can't remember what the accuracy record of his predictions is. I mean, it's a real fun event, I think, for people up there. Is it 50-50? Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, maybe a little better than 50-50, but I don't think the groundhog actually does anything that dictates the weather. I mean, I've jumped on conspiracy theories before, but I don't see that one.
This means I want to know what President Trump thinks of Punxsutawney Phil. I want his annual prediction.
It's not just any rodent. That's the best rodent. It's the greatest rodent ever. I've seen all the other rodents. They're no good.
The greatest rodent ever. Why didn't Disney make a film about it?
There you go.
I mean, there was the movie Groundhog Day. I mean, obviously, but I mean, it's really not. It's really not that skewed.
That wasn't about the rodent, though. That was about other things, lesser topics.
Right. It was a funny movie. I mean, one of my favorite movies, though. I mean, just the idea that you wake up every morning the same day every time. I don't know. I mean, wouldn't that be kind of interesting?
I really can identify,
Yeah. If I could have a little bit of a reset where I could tweak something, and fix a few things, and it just comes out like I already know what that person is going to say or whatever and do. But that's not the way life operates and everything like that.
It's full of surprises, which is really better.
Yeah,
you see the alternative. You see why real is better.
That's right. So we're at the beginning of February. I think the official first day of spring is like March 20th. So that's about that covers within a 6-week period. I mean, if he said 6 more weeks of winter from now, we'd still be fine for spring, right?
Right, in theory. But we're right at the halfway mark of winter. Right, we're right. We are dead. Dead of winter is right now. So, anything that can get us out of it will be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I've said, I think multiple times, is that as I've gotten older, I don't appreciate the snow as much as I did when I was younger, especially since I have no one here to shovel it with me for the most part. I think my wife has gone on strike. I don't think she wants to do anymore.
She makes herself scarce on snow days.
Yeah, she pretty much does.
Honey, are you home?
She used to be really good. She would sometimes get out there before I would, but now it's like if I don't do it, it's not getting done. And I've seen other things, because I said this before too, is that trying to find any kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
I was younger. It's impossible to do that, and I've seen this from other people on Facebook around the country where they're facing that same thing. I mean, restaurants and businesses are, may face a worker shortage, but we're facing that kid labor shortage thing about snow shoveling. Whatever happened to good old fashioned hard work and somebody
entrepreneurship? Someone's and here's the thing about it. Why doesn't a teacher say that? Hey guys, there's a snowstorm. You could probably, some of you dudes could go make some bucks, right? But the teacher, the school is not on, entrepreneurialism and, go around and scrape up money and things that actually provide for you, right? That's not in their skill set. They don't want to teach people to look for money making opportunities like that. That's not something, that's part of this is like, it's never talked about in school.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, between some parents and the school teachers, the unions and whatever, the kids are a lot softer, right? I mean, the parents don't really push a lot. A lot of parents don't push their kids to go out there and do what they did or their parents did, when they were younger. they're now fine with the kids sitting around playing video games and doing whatever, posting Instagram and TikTok videos and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, somebody could make some serious coin in my neighborhood if there was a kid. Because one thing is that it's one thing if I don't even see the guys, the landscaper guys or the freelance guys driving around their little truck like they used to, coming by and looking for opportunities, which is fine. I'd pay them too. But if a teenager comes knocking on your door most of the time, I mean, at least the way it used to be is that most people would say, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, I'll give you, back then it was probably what, like 10 or 15 bucks, 20 bucks maybe to shovel some areas and things like that. But you help the kid out and you do that. It's almost like having when the Girl Scouts show up on your door with the cookies and
right.
whatnot. Some of those other school.
Because it's valued. The get up and go nature of it is valued by society, and that's not really happening anymore, right? That's another thing. In schools, they're not saying guys who people who go out and make this for themselves. That ideal is not encouraged, right?
Yeah, something. This he's going to hate this, but so when let's say I think I'll wait till my grandson turns like 11, so that'll be like another year because he's got I think it's his 10th birthday coming up this month, maybe tomorrow even, but maybe for his 11th birthday next year, I'll get him a snow shovel.
Yeah.
Right. Here's your own snow shovel. So what I want you to do is that when it snows,
going to lead to lots of other toys.
when it snows in Indiana, in 10 months from now or whatever, go out there and make some money. Your dad's doing well as a doctor, but that doesn't mean you can't have to sit around and be spoiled. Go out there and make some of your own money, and you can buy your own games and do other stuff. You'll have some actual money. I'm going to have to talk to my daughter about that and say, okay, I can't run your life, but I highly recommend that at least your boys, when they get old enough, that they do a little bit of hard work and everything like that. I think my son-in-law would actually go along with that. That'd actually be kind of a funny gift. My wife might. I don't know how my wife feels about that, but I guess I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
Ask forgiveness, not permission, right?
That's right. That's always the best way. We know that after years of marriage. All right. Well, on to more serious matters. We still have the issue of Ukraine front and center, here going on. And it's interesting. I mean, I was trying to find some figures on, the troop differences, the troop size. So I guess the military. I mean, Ukraine, at best, it looks like could come up with just under half of what Russia could. I mean, if Russia decided to throw everything at them, it'd be like 900,000 people or something like troops, and Ukraine at best might be able to get 360. So that, they're vastly outnumbered, and I just don't know even if they're as well trained or ready for a conflict as Russia would be. And what are all these ramifications? What's going on with our president? Where are we going here?
Well, there's a few things on that. First of all, we're rushing over there to train. So I mean, they're going to get training from us and other people in NATO. I don't, quickly enough, comprehensively enough. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Basically, right? One of the things that Ukraine is doing to try to balance that out, right? The troop advantage is they're assembling and training a large volunteer force. Now, it sounds like a good idea because, you have, patriots fighting for their country and doing it, sort of on the fly, right? We need you now, and they stop and answer the call of arms and so forth. But, but volunteer armies have a long record of abuse of the citizenry and so forth that professional armies don't really have, right? So, I mean, there's some dangers of, especially, there's part of Russia part of Ukraine that's mostly ethnically Russian, which is, when Putin makes these claims, right, that's what he's talking about is like the Donbass region, which is mostly Russians. He's like, why can't we just have the part back that's mostly Russians, So, I mean, and that's what he's looking at doing. But, this is a strange conflict. For one thing, The prime minister of Ukraine says, what are you guys talking about? What do you think is these guys aren't about to attack us, and you're panicking over nothing. I don't know if someone's standing on his foot, right, making him say that, or he's trying to deflect and throw a weird mind game at Putin, or there really isn't the big threat that the West is saying, right? It's not like our intelligence hasn't been wrong on a pretty regular basis here lately. So it's kind of hard to see where they are and what's going on.
Yeah, you're mentioning the ethnically Russian part of Ukraine. I mean, one of the things is that the Russian is spoken in lots of places in Ukraine. But I was reading an article the other day it was kind of interesting. I think since Russia annexed Crimea, I think there has been more backlash against Russia. I mean, even Ukrainians who had been speaking Russian are basically abandoning the Russian and now saying we're going to only speak Ukrainian from now on. There's some bad blood, some ill will from some of the things that Russia has done over the years, and I think some of the Ukrainians are now feeling like, wait a minute here. It's like we have our problems, we have our issues, but we don't want to be part of this, this Russian empire, this rebuilding of the old Soviet Union, which seems to be part of Putin's greater goal, if he can, is that he can just swallow countries up one by one or whatever, and just kind of amass this big, huge nation in the end.
Put the band back together. He sort of sees that as his mission.
Right. And I mean, we've seen, since the Berlin Wall fell, we've seen a lot of kind of back and forth. I mean, sometimes a country kind of swings a little bit back more into that whole Soviet sphere a little bit, and then we've had some democracy movements and things like that, and they last, and sometimes they falter a little bit. And but this I mean, that's kind of the way the world is that there are ebbs and flows. Things kind of go back and forth a little bit, but it's still, in general, I mean, even with corruption and other things, in general, it's still better for these countries as they try to sort it out than it was being this captive part of the Soviet Union, and the free they're still enjoying more freedoms than they would instead of having Putin try to control everything for them, right
and more access to outside capital, ways, actual concrete ways to make their lives better. So yeah, and like the Baltic states and Poland have probably gotten stronger, more Western, right, over the last 20 years or so forth, more attached to the West, which is another thing that concerns the Russians, right? They're what Putin says is like, I'm raising some points here that are real points, and no one will talk about my points. They won't respond to our concerns at all. Well, your concern is, that you want to take over a country, right? Basically. So, no, we're not going to go for that necessarily. But, Russia is trying to reassemble a sort of a belt around it of influence, right? And, these countries are better off not in that satellite. And some of them won't see it that way. The rest, Georgia has kind of gone back, moved back toward Russia. But Ukraine is kind of not. Ukraine has more of a tradition of civil government than Georgia does in recent years. Also, Joe Biden did fix the justice, or I say fix is probably the wrong word, undermine the justice system in Ukraine when he was vice president. There's that tape, right, that we saw over and over again during the campaign of him talking about getting the prosecutor fired. Well, that prosecutor is still around, and the other people that they fired and that they, hooked and crooked to get the people that would cover up Democrat malfeasance are still around, and now they have a complaint against Joe, and that evidence has not been destroyed. So he's moving, carefully, because he has a lot of exposure here. What they were doing in Ukraine was not straight. You're paying somebody $83,000 a month to be on an oil company board who doesn't know anything about oil, right? You're not really paying for their expertise. You know that, and I know that, and I think the American people know that. So at some point, that's going to have to get addressed by the Biden administration, because that's Ukraine's weapon that's Ukraine's leverage on us, right? And so for all the talk we heard of, Trump having all these allegiances with foreign leaders and so forth, Biden truly does. He truly does have exposure with the Ukrainians that could undermine what he does and what he has the situations he puts our troops in and so forth in this, right? I mean, we could be fighting this war just to cover up Biden's crimes.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you, what's your opinion in terms of, the kind of the list of things that the Biden administration has told Russia? It's like, if you invade, Ukraine, here's what we're going to do. I mean, are those genuine? Are they realistic? I mean, if Biden goes through and if Russia does this and Biden says, we're not going to allow Nord Stream 2 to go through, what happens to, gas supplies in Europe? What's kind of the fallout of this?
Right. Well, for one thing, Germany is all in on Nord Stream now, right? Germany's closing nuclear plants, closing coal-fired. Germany's saying we're getting our power from this, whatever small amount we can generate through renewables, right? I mean, that's basically where they are on power as a country. And that may not be enough power, which is another kind of interesting question. Like, you put all your eggs in that basket and that basket is not sufficient, where do you go then, right? But so the Germans cannot afford to help us here. They cannot afford to go too far on this because they've cut themselves off from the backup plan. So, I think they say, targeted sanctions. So sanctions against individuals who are highly connected to the Ukrainian government, cut off their international money flows and so forth. And that can be somewhat effective, but I mean, there's enough people who are not interested in helping American interests now around the world that, they'll be able to find outlets for their investments, and they'll be able to find people to take their money.
Yeah,
I don't think they care about our threats.
I have to admit, I am still somewhat dumbfounded that that Merkel went in this direction, that she basically put the eggs in that one basket. I really thought that she was smarter than that, and she has mortgaged I was going to say West Germany, Germany's future in essence, on this whole thing. I mean, yes,
betting on the Russians to behave. Who bets on the Russians to behave? What idiot does that?
It's like, I don't know. I mean, every time I go through things like this, and this is one of many, many examples, Reagan, trust but verify kind of a thing. Yeah. It's like, right. Hello.
Yeah. In those cases, those guys' case, verify the heck out of it,
Yeah, and she comes from a country that had been unified. I mean, that had been divided, right? There was a communist bloc and there was a free bloc. It's like, what makes you think that you can trust these people?
Yeah,
it's just astonishing that could happen. In some ways, I think history has to take note of this. As we go along, and we don't know how this is really going to play out yet. But if it really does turn out that Russia is going to have that complete stranglehold over Germany on their energy supplies, that has got to be noted, for Merkel's, and her legacy, that she basically, just signed off on all that. She just, so the country became subservient to Russia at this point, and who knows what Russia will be in the future, because, they obviously, once again, Putin has very big ambitions, and there's really nothing to stop him. I certainly don't see Joe Biden and, really being that big a person to stop this guy at this point, because also, as you say, there are interests, there are things that Biden has out there that are kind of risky for him. And they're showing that, when it comes to foreign policy, they're kind of clueless. Now, I want, you were mentioning when we were talking about this, the troop strength and the training of the voluntary troops and things like this. One thing that popped into my mind was, I guess it's Israel and I think, South Korea both have some mandatory conscription, right? For, I think Korea's got maybe 3 years. I don't know if Israel's 2 years or 3 years or whatever.
But when Israel's 3 years, yeah, men and women.
3 years. So that's like So then that's like Korea, which is an interesting thing now. For me, I hadn't really thought about this until now, but they put in their 3 years and then they can leave, right? And then they can go get a job and do whatever. But one of the advantages of this is that you have all these civilians who had some training, right? They've had some kind of military training. So if you came to a crisis point and you needed to call on more people, you could go back. I mean, I think a lot of those people who've been through 3 years of service would probably come back voluntarily even and say, yes, I'm going to answer the call. I am going to defend my country. And I've already, I'm just going to dust off my uniform or whatever and kind of brush up my skills. But they will already be far ahead in some ways of having some training than people that have never been in the military before. They have some kind of feeling. They've been through some, they've been through some situations. So it could in a lot of ways. I mean, Israel and South Korea have got somewhat almost a ready reserve force should they ever need it to bulk up their forces. And I think a lot of those people would actually, if it's defending the country, I think a lot of people would come back and do that. This makes me wonder whether or not more countries that could be potentially vulnerable to get into these clashes, whether or not that should be more of a thing. I don't know if any other country does that besides those two countries, because I haven't really looked into it. It's just one of those things that kind of ran through my head as you were talking.
Right. I don't know that that's practical for every country on the planet, but those are two relatively small in area countries, relatively homogenous in terms of makeup of racial background, so forth. Certainly a lot more than the United States or France or even but it is practical there, and it does work there. And you have this life network of people who have worked together closely before, brought together, might never have known each other, but for the their experience in the military. So they're not only trained in being military, but they're trained in cooperating and in thinking in these ways and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits to it. There, that makes part of what makes Israel a more formidable force.
Yeah, I mean, you need teamwork. You need to be able to put all those things together, and that's important. And that's something that's not easy. I mean, a lot of offices, collaborative things. You need teamwork, and there's some people that are just not attuned to that, and they haven't learned how to do that. But boy, in the military, you have to learn to do a lot of different things together under some pretty interesting conditions, some challenging conditions. Yeah, they're already thinking along that. Some of those people that have that were there for just 3 years, they could be very good strategists, right? They could be some of your people who understand the strategy and can come in there and help you on that. So there's so much going on out there that'll be very interesting to see how this moves forward. So I'm sure next week when we talk about this again, it'll be an update, but I'm not sure a whole lot will change. It's just there's just this overhang right now, in terms of what's going on here, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, the next big issue here is the Supreme Court nomination, the opening. So to me, it seems that Justice Breyer finally acquiesced to all the pressure from the liberal left and said, okay, I'm done. I'll retire at the end of this term. You can have my seat and go. And, we figured it was going to go to some progressive lefty just because that's who Biden seems to listen to more than anybody else. But he's made it clear that this is going to be a black Supreme Court judge, a black female, which has riled up some people because he's now made this about race and gender, a type of thing like this. And there's been a lot of things going on social media, a lot of chatter about a lot of people, media's going after conservatives going after the liberals. What's your take on where we're at now?
Well, he's got it down to 3 or 4 people that are judges now. I believe they're all on the bench now, distinguished black women. But there's a lot of talk that you ruled out, so it's 13. You ruled out 94% of the country, right? So if he just appoints a black woman, then most of the criticisms of this go away, right? We know, whoever you appoint, right? If they're qualified, you can get them to the Senate, they can be on the court. But, since you said that up front, since you said we're not considering anybody who's not a black woman, right? You've told a lot of Americans that, this is done on a racial basis. You also hurt this judge, whoever this judge is, right? Whoever ends up getting this, they're going to have an asterisk by their name that says, I was chosen for my race and gender. And, that is Joe Biden's fault. It should not be that way. But that's what it is, and it's because of his actions, the things he said about this. So you're putting this person in kind of a tough spot, and you're setting up some really stupid confirmation hearings, because at this point, right? It's one thing. It's 6-3 on the court, right? So you're replacing one of the three with another three who will last a while, right? So, but at this point, the Republicans cannot really pull a lot of stunts on this. If it's a qualified judge, they give them the regular treatment, and then they have to approve them, right? They have to let it go through. You can't Merrick Garland this person unless he does, one of a few stupid things. One is, as a result, in order to meet this racial criteria, you appoint someone so wacky that the Senate can't, coalesce around her. Or you try to something political stunt like Kamala Harris, right? So you can get her off of being vice president and find somebody who doesn't actually, somebody below 40%. You don't think about their poll numbers being dragged down by the vice president, but in fact, it is possible and happening. So, they would like to be rid of Harris. They could dump all that. She's sort of a lawyer, right? But Harris that's like a Harriet Miers level, non-qualified, can't really do that mistake. So, he has to sort of stay color within the lines here, but as long as he does, we have to color in the lines too. We'll be able to ask our tough questions and ferret out statements and so forth, but you're not going to be able to turn her down unless there's some kind of spectacular thing that we don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, one of the liberals, they've been firing back about all the complaints about the conservatives for complaining about Biden kind of boxing himself in on this, and one of those what keeps being brought up here is just that how Reagan and I guess Trump had both said that they were going to nominate a woman to the court, but I don't see this as being the equivalent of this because I mean, at least with a woman, okay, so you say you're saying I want to nominate a woman. I mean, they were going to say a qualified woman too, but at least women are making up 51% or more of the population. So you still have a broad swath of people to choose from. As you have mentioned, when you then have added the gender and you say now I'm going to have a black woman, you now have a very tiny subsection of the American populace, and so now this is without a question an affirmative action seat. I mean, she's now going to hold the black woman seat, kind of a thing like that, and that's not fair to this person at all. Is right. That this should be based on qualifications. It's unfortunate how I think in this particular case, what Biden has done is that this is actually truly politicizing the Supreme Court and the choice here. You can make arguments about some of the things that have happened in the last several picks, but this one is clearly a politicized pick because of the way he's approached this. Kamala Harris. I mean, I chuckled when I first heard that she was even potentially out there. I mean, you float these trial balloons, you throw up a lot of names and everything like that, but how do you get a vice president who's real experience? I mean, she's a lawyer, she was a prosecutor. What's the and as a vice president, she's been a complete failure. Her approval ratings are trash. I don't even know that she's all that well liked among her former colleagues in the Senate anyway. So,
that's one of the things I think about is like, will all those, even the Democrats, line up and vote for her? Because she's not a nice person, and the chances that you've annoyed someone enough to like turn over the apple cart on you, it's not zero with this particular individual. So I'm not sure that it would pass if they nominate her. They're not going to nominate her.
Yeah,
I
they're
think
not going to. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear.
it's
But
virtually the only way they can screw this up. I mean, any worse, right?
right.
They've already said they've already taken whatever hit they're going to take over saying it's going to be a black woman, right? And all the criticism that has come from that. That's not going to get any worse. Almost no matter if it's a qualified jurist, they have a list of 4 or 5 women who are on the bench now and doing good work and so forth. But the ideal here is that you'll appoint the best available person of your political persuasion, right? I mean, no one expects Biden to appoint, a FedSoc approved conservative, right? We understand you're the president. You're going to appoint someone who sort of sees this as you do, right? But it's always been this patina. Well, this is the best qualified person. This is logically the next person in line, or one of the 4 or 5 people in the country who can be said. I mean, Kavanaugh was a DC Court of Appeals, which is generally the AAA farm team of the Supreme Court, right? I mean, he was a classic set of moves up to the Supreme Court. So as long as this person is a jurist of decent reputation, she's going to be approved, and we should not get too far out over our skis trying to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, the votes aren't going to be there for the Republicans to really. They would have a hard time trying to get any Democrats really to vote against her. So I think this is a fait accompli in that sense, and really, I don't really see why. If you bring up a qualified judge, why they should fight this over politics. That doesn't help the Republicans' cause at all. And we are in an election year, so I think the Republicans can somewhat benefit by this. I mean, as they run, and how they're if they behave badly, I think that would hurt them, for the Senate campaigns this year.
But they cannot rubber stamp it. They cannot come in and have, love and flowers and roses. It has to be a legitimate investigation, a careful vetting of the nominee, as Senator Grassley promised yesterday. And it has that our efforts to determine if this person's qualified have to be credible, right? But if we find them to be qualified, then I think there's real political advantage, not just staving off bad, but you actually are going to get points by being reasonable about this, right? Because one of our big arguments against the other side right now, and it is starting to really capture some interest and traction, is that the other side is nuts, right? They're crazy. They're way off the back end of normal, right? And so if you go getting in the gutter as bad as them, then why us instead of them, right? The people who are tired of the craziness, right, are coming our way, right? And this is one of the things that could upset that.
Right. The Republicans cannot behave like the Democrats, and particularly Kamala Harris, as they did in Kavanaugh, particularly. I mean,
unless the person, facts come out about the person that justifies it, right? It's not. That's why I'm saying it's not a rubber stamp, because you do have to go vet this person. You do have to get to the truth. But if the truth says this is within the realm of who we accept as a Supreme Court justice, then we need to not do what the Democrats do in that situation, not freak out, not continue to find these, Blasey Ford type nutbags to tell lies, right? It's vote for it. It's do your job in Washington. And if the person's qualified, vote for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that this is where it's incumbent upon the Biden administration for them to make sure that they have also done their vetting before they go ahead and make the final choice, and put that person up for nomination, so that even with Republican scrutiny, they'll still pass more or less with flying colors. There won't be the big controversies that could derail the nomination, which would
real chance to look like the adults in the room.
Right. Yeah.
Provided the candidate's not a whack job. Yeah. I think actually a whack job puts us in more trouble than a just a straight up, right? So we can't not react if it's a whack job, right? So, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's the thing here too is that, I mean, I'm sure the Democrats have become very gleeful over this opportunity because they also realize, I think, that with whoever is nominated, that the court, those three liberals on the court will be even much more in unison with each other and aligned than they were with Breyer. Breyer was pragmatic in a lot of ways and a pretty reasonable guy in a lot of ways. I don't imagine, the way that Biden has run his presidency to date, that this jurist, even though the judge will be highly qualified, et cetera, that, when it comes down to political alignment with the other judges, on the Supreme Court justices, that I think this is going to be a much harder left, group than it was with Breyer around, and even Ginsburg,
right.
Previously too.
Right.
So,
right. So, and I also think that, they know that this is probably the only one Biden will get to pick. Clarence Thomas will drag himself up there until it goes back to being a Republican, no matter how bad it hurts, right? And so, they got to get this right. They have to get someone that'll be on that court for a while.
Yeah, we just need Clarence Thomas to survive about another 2+ years or whatever.
3.5 years, yeah. Just get to 2025, buddy. See that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it's strange. They don't be placing any bets on things, but no one knows what life expectancy is and what people's decisions are going to be. I mean, once again, because I think, was it you last week we were talked about Scalia? I mean, we didn't see that coming. Those things happen, and then it just kind of you're in this situation where you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. We thought we had this for another 15 years or whatever, and so it's but cross our fingers. Hopefully, this will be the one and only pick from the Biden administration. And I do believe that probably will be, especially the way the Biden administration has been running, because it's hard. I think part of this is that it's hard to imagine that the Democrats can keep the White House in 2024 at the pace that the Democrats are moving right now. So it's now, in addition, part of this too, I wanted to say is that, so we have this Georgetown law professor, Ilya Shapiro, and he sent some tweets out and he apologized for some tweets, but Georgetown put him on leave. And I can't remember. I meant to look. He was supposed to be heading up something fairly soon too, right? To some other thing at Georgetown or whatever, and
like a constitutional law project.
Yeah, something like right. So here's a guy who's basically a conservative, professor.
Cato. He's worked at Cato for years. Right. I guess he still does, probably.
Yeah. So he, I mean, not the kind of person who's conventional in academia in terms of conservative credentials. But he's out there. I mean, he didn't say anything that was outright wrong in my opinion. I mean, he was pointing out some things that we have just talked about in terms of making this a race-based pick and all of this, politicizing all of this stuff. Is this part of Georgetown? Is this sensitivity? Is there cancel culture kind of train running here a little bit? What's
Georgetown is, off the rack, right? So Georgetown, they have found this connection to slavery, and they're trying to find out who all they should pay reparations to, and it's really consuming the campus, right? They've really allowed these things to take over, especially the things like law school and so forth. So he's in the law school, and he's running a constitutional law program within the law school. And he'd just been chosen to do it. And I'm with you. I'm a little shocked that Georgetown hired him, given his political leanings, right? Because the Georgetown's pretty hardcore leftist school, as all Jesuit institutions are. Well, not all, but most Jesuit institutions are. So, all he said was, like you said, all he said was what we just said, which is you should not say up front that it's going to be this racial and gender characteristic, right? If Biden just named, it's going to be just Judge Ketanji Brown, right? She's one of the leading candidates, right? She's our new person. Then, you don't have any objection to that, right? There's no, she got chosen. He looked around the country. Who was best? This judge, right? So that's who we're putting forward. So, but that's not what happened. What happened is, it's framed up as like, we're going to punch, we're going to check a box. We're going to check a gender and a race box here. And I think that's old, tired thinking. And I think a lot of the country is turned off by it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, so she would be that would make 4 women on the court, right? The three liberals, and then 8, right? So I mean, that from a gender standpoint, that's pretty balanced. We're going to have, okay, at that point. I kind of wonder too, is like, are we going to, is this a pattern that, should the Democrats get another pick, 8 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, are they still going to be on that race and gender, kind of train? Where are we going with that down the line too? But you're right. I mean, Shapiro, the fact that he even was hired by Georgetown gets to be kind of shocking, because you can imagine the number of conservatives at Georgetown have got to be pretty infinitesimal. I mean, I'd like to ask Professor Shapiro, it's like, do you know any other conservative professors over there? Please tell me. At least privately. Tell me.
Every once in a while they make news, but it's the answer is not zero. And like, if you go to Mass there, so they have something that it's called, I can't think of the name of it now. It's a chapel, right? And so they have masses. It's for the students, right? So like they have Mass at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10:15 at night on Sunday night. So like, I'm out coaching basketball. Like, I've raced down to that chapel, the last chance at Mass of the day, many times, right? It's like, you're not going to get to go to Mass that day unless you make it to Georgetown. And so when you go to those things, so that does not look like a liberal bastion. It's a conservative ish leaning service that you get. And, there's a lot of hardcore, or not hardcore, but not liberal kids in those churches, like, because the kids kind of run the masses, right? And the students kind of do all the production of it. So except for that which has to be done by the priest, right? So so yeah, it's not a monolithically leftist school. If and if you go there, you will see that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but hopefully Shapiro gets some support there, in that whatever this, what did they put him on? They put him on leave again. Hopefully this is not going to be something that lasts very long, that they'll come to their senses on this. It's ridiculous. You happen to mention Georgetown and all this slavery stuff, which seems to be this thing about these DC schools. Just like, oh my gosh, we gotta make reparations, or we gotta fix this and all this kind of stuff. So after we did last week's show, I had this luncheon appointment with one of my a financial advisor, and he lives in Loudoun County. So he's out kind of in your neck of the woods, but for that. And I've never to me this was interesting, because I've never considered this guy a very political guy. He's just an investment guy. I mean, he actually started off his career as a chef, okay, of all things, and so. But his wife drives a bus for the Loudoun County school system. He's got a 16-year-old daughter, but he says for the first time ever, he actually got a political sign. Like, he had a Youngkin sign. Now, he had it in his car a lot of times and stuff, things like this. But all that school board stuff that, that's come up out there, that's been highly controversial, drew a lot of national attention, right? And right. McCall kind of blew it on that whole aspect of things. But and we're going to look into this at Accuracy in Academia a little bit more, because I had not seen this, but I want to at least push this out a little bit to another audience. Was that he said there was a woman there who, I guess she's with the NAACP, and she'd been kind of noisy about Northam and all the stuff that had happened with all the blackface and all those controversies that happened. And then she wound up getting this piece of land, this, kind of like almost like a plantation kind of a thing like this, and went to a nonprofit that she formed, some freedom thing, he said, and now she has a contract with the school system in Loudoun County, apparently, to have field trips to this place to see slave graves, right? Except that my friend says there are no slave graves on that property. It's a complete fabrication of, that's what he's saying. And now now Leesburg apparently is going to do the same thing. They're going to give her a piece of land. I guess she's going to roll it up into this nonprofit, and then she's going to try to get this contract with Leesburg to bring public school kids there to see graves that apparently never were there, or something like this. But yeah, I mean, this is just the lunacy of what we're going through. It's like, there's this almost this crazy mentality that, oh, we're in the South, so we must have had slaves and graves of these slaves, and we've got to find them, and we've got to fix this. I don't know. I mean, I know
the Civil War history in that part of the world was particularly brutal, right? So Front Royal is on the other side of Loudoun County, but not that far. So Front Royal changed hands in the Civil War 72 times, and every time it changed hands, they hung 8 people. It was like, we're hanging 8 Unions. The next time, we're hanging 8 Confederates. So people kept getting hung 8 at a time in this town just because of who they were. It eventually became that in Loudoun County, after Gettysburg, the Union Army burned every farm in the county to the ground. Every farmhouse in Loudoun County was burned right down to the ground. And it was insisted that they not be allowed to be. They burned to the point that they could not be rebuilt. They put that county flat on its back for 40 or 50 years. And you can, I'm not arguing, that's what happens in wars, right? But, I don't know how much of this there really is out there, because after the Civil War, Loudoun County, it could not go back to being, a plantation based economy, because the plantations, the wealth behind those plantations was gone, and the farms themselves in many cases were gone. So, it's like, that's not really the story to tell, right? Maybe in Loudoun County, the story is the brutality of war and the brutality of, what people can do to each other when they are set against each other like this. I mean, it's really a more poignant and a more story with more bearing on what's going on today.
Yeah, and once again, I don't know all the details. I mean, this friend was briefly explaining some of the things. The thing too here was this particular woman who was critical of Northam, after she got the land and all this stuff, she quieted down.
Yeah,
she's
busy, right?
Yeah, it's like, exactly how did that work? Did who greased whose palms here to keep her quiet, get her quiet? Anyway, so that's a story that may be developing, something that it may have already been out there a little bit, but we want to look into this a little bit more, because it was something I hadn't heard of, and I think if there's truth to be on there, and there's some shenanigans going on there, I want to know about it. All right, moving on. You're kind of the show's pollmeister, but I just saw this morning that the Harvard CAPS Harris poll, and I don't know what the CAP stands for, had Biden now. It had like 1,800 people they surveyed. 39% approval. Real Clear Politics averages at 41%. I know you're the Rasmussen poll guy. You've got some other things. What are you showing now?
So Biden, he got up to 42% one day last week. Then it went to 41 for a couple of days, and yesterday it was at 39. So he's coming back down. So now Biden has spent more days at 42 or below on Rasmussen than Trump. He has spent, Trump spent 5 days below 40. Biden has now spent 4 days below 40. Now, the other thing about this is, like, all of Trump's really bad poll numbers came at basically the stage in his presidency where Biden is now. So, there is a chance he could recover, and, he could be in the mid to high 40s and so forth, like Trump ended up being, right? But his polling right now looks worse than Trump's ever was, right? And Biden has not been even at 45 since the Afghanistan, since September, before it finally got below 45, and has tumbled ever since. He hasn't been at 43 since October, right? So, I mean, he is down. He is down below 43%. Now, base gives you 42. So if you're at 39, which is where he was yesterday, you're cutting into your own, you're turning off your own base, right? Even reliable Democrat voters are saying no to Joe.
Right. And yeah, I mean, the disapproval rate is in the 50s, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is just, I don't know. I mean,
20 and 30 and 40 points underwater in some of these polls, right?
yeah, I'm not a presidential historian. I haven't studied the whole nature of how the polling has gone throughout the presidencies, but this to me, just as a layperson, just seems stunning that, you're now just over the 1 year mark, and you're just been struggling with these numbers all the time, where when Trump was had these, relatively low numbers, the media was just, jumping up and down and dancing gleefully, like they kept pointing to this. This is sometimes we get some stories on Biden's poll numbers, from the media, but for the most part, there's the coverage of Biden's poll numbers versus the coverage of Trump's poll numbers are really, to me, night and day. There's a huge gap there, right? I mean, they're not talking about it to the same extent, because it's just so embarrassing. Because I think the media is just like, they don't know how they can help this guy. Even with all their influence, what do they do? How do they prop this guy up? Because he's fumbled the ball so many times.
Well, they do things like they say, the polling's not really that bad. And why don't Americans recognize all these achievements that he's had? And it's like, well, we don't really see them. So one of the things that's going on with Biden that's really kind of painful is, the pandemic put some wild gyrations into the economic labor stats and so forth. Like Biden tomorrow or Friday is going to get a jobs report that says we added about 125,000 jobs, which is basically nothing, right? That's a terrible jobs report. But unemployment probably won't change much because so many people are out of the labor force. I mean, the denominator is changing too, right? So, there's things that, like he can say that he had 6 or 7% growth, right? Well, the economy's bouncing back and forth, so there's wild gyrations and all this stuff. So, their thing is to like, oh, well, don't you see these big achievements? But it's like the achievements, the economy growing, if it's growing, right, that's not tied to anything Biden did, right? No one says, okay, well, as a result of Biden's tax policy or regulatory policy or whatever, everything's growing. It's growing, yay, Biden, right? And that connection is not being made. One of the big things, the big stories that's happening here is like government trust in government is falling, precipitously. You have basically your health bureaucracy has lied to you for 2 years, right? And people are starting to understand that, and they may disagree on which lies were the most important, but they're coming to the point where the messaging is so mixed and muddled and uncertain that people don't trust it anymore. So you're getting a whole different dynamic on trust in government and so forth. And the thing Democrats have always been able to rely on is not there anymore.
That's right. All right, we're wrapping up the show. 2 minutes.
There's a bunch of stuff going on there. It's going to be the Washington Commanders.
I wanted the Washington Commandos. I'm going commando.
Speaking of people getting fed up in Canada, there's about a 600-mile truck convoy that has arrived in Ottawa, and nothing is moving around Ottawa. And the Prime Minister apparently has escaped to the United States to get away from the angry truckers. And if this place wasn't an incredible joke to start with, it would be now. But so now supposedly there's one being talked up in the United States, and what these truckers are saying is, we're not going to live with these vax rules anymore. You're going to change, or we're not moving. So, and right now, Trudeau's telling them, you have to go home, and he's trying the same old playbook, and it's not sticking. It's not. They don't care. They have seen that they're bigger than the government.
Yeah, my wife's first reaction to when she saw that news, she says, "So why don't we do that here?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, they could do it. They could do it here.
Yeah.
I guess if you know, I mean, we have some trucking problems and trying to find enough drivers, but I'm sure you can get a decent convoy and kind of, you know, and just make the point of the problems, you know, mandates and everything else that are going on. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. As always, please stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. And we will see you again next week.